It's been totally falsified. Any strict empiricist or any scientist with a sliver of objectivity would have to admit this, but obviously their tenure, their labs, their livelihoods, their esteem, their egos all rely on continuing this narrative. So welcome everybody to another Beyond Terrain mini lecture. Today is kind of a follow-up video to our first video on the so-called immune system. Today we're going to discuss a couple things that we kind of left out in the first videos, a couple new findings of mine that can kind of tie this all in to make a little bit more sense as well and ground it a little bit more even in our modern understandings of things. And we're going to cover some more specific immune cells, so-called immune cells. We're also going to talk about the lymphatic system, and we're going to get into a little bit deeper conversation surrounding the concept of tolerance. Tolerance being what is the actual observed phenomenon with what we perceive as being memory in our immune system. I'm not going to discuss antibodies in depth today. That's going to be the next video, and probably not the last, but might be the last for now on the so-called immune system. So unless you guys really want more, so you guys can let me know. Our waitlist for the Beyond Terrain community is growing and growing pretty impressively. The response has been great. I'm so looking forward to getting this thing launched. It's looking really amazing so far. You guys are going to absolutely love it. We're only releasing 100 spots for founding members, and these founding members are really going to be able to shape the community, right? We're going to have that complimentary one-on-one call to discuss goals and what you want to get out of the community as well, right? So beyond that, obviously, you're going to lock in that low price for life as a little thank you for being one of these founding, contributing members. So it goes a long way in my eyes, and it's greatly appreciated. I appreciate all the support that you guys have given me on this, the start of this journey here on Beyond Terrain. So we got lots of growth to come, lots more to come in the future. Yeah, we're just in the seedling phase of things here. So without further ado, let's get into the video today. Really urge you guys to check out the last video on the immune system. I'm going to put it up in the corner here for you guys. In brief, kind of what we discussed was, you know, that there is no such thing as this immune system as we know it as a defense mechanism, right? So the term immune implies that it's sort of this defense mechanism towards external invaders. So it's a misnomer, right? We're not denying that there aren't structures that we associate with being immune cells, right? So things like macrophages, white blood cells, dendritic cells, different things like this, right? We're not denying the existence of these things. That's not the purpose of this video. Obviously, we're not denying things such as inflammation or fever or anything like that, sort of these non-specific responses. What we are denying, right, is that the so-called immune system is not a defense mechanism, that these structures, these immune cells in our bodies are working with our microbes. Our microbes are not invaders. They play a very important role in detoxification as well as rejuvenation and sort of cleaning up the toxic and dead and dying tissues that are happening in the body in a diseased state. We are specifically denying the concept of immune memory, the idea that antibodies are specific. We covered this briefly. We didn't get into the evidence behind it, but antibodies are non-specific in all laboratory experiments. They all have some sort of cross-reactivity that truly goes uncontrolled in all of biomedical research, which is why there's a reproducibility crisis. It's because of the use of antibodies. All antibodies are non-specific. We understand much less about them than we think, but we're going to talk more specifically about these in our following video, as I mentioned earlier. And today what we're going to discuss is this idea of tolerance. That's what we observe as being this immune memory, right? What we call immune memory is actually just a tolerance, or you could also say adaptation, right? It's our bodies adapting to the world that we live in. Our bodies are not a battlefield. We are not at war with microbes. Microbes arise pleomorphically in our body in response to diseased environments. Diseased environments are caused by toxicities, deficiencies, and traumas. These all cause dead and dying tissues, if you want to call them cells, although we're going to be covering the misconceptions in cell biology too in future videos. But this whole concept of attack, defend, destroy, we don't subscribe to that whatsoever in the terrain paradigm. We understand that everything acts symbiotically, and it only is perceived this way probably because of our own psychological problems, and obviously this manifests in many different ways. You could look at the state of the world currently. So let's first touch on the concept of phagocytosis and this idea of macrophage bioaccumulation. So when I say bioaccumulation, what I mean is the uptake of toxicity from the environment, right? So microbes bioaccumulate toxins. You could think of heavy metals, pharmaceuticals, any sort of toxicity, any artificial substance microbes can uptake, and they bioremediate. So they transform it into a less toxic version. But the idea is that, even in the empirical literature, we can see that microbes can change these toxic forms of toxicities into less toxic ones. So that's bioremediation, and bioaccumulation is the uptake of these toxins. So what's observed in microbes is that they can uptake more toxicity than our tissues can handle, right? So they can have higher concentrations of toxicity, relieving our cells from the damage that's being done from these toxins. So the concepts of bioaccumulation and bioremediation are well studied in the literature, if that means anything to you. And you can go read papers on the topic. Now, there's actually a body of literature that suggests that phagocytosis and cells that do phagocytosis and uptake, bacterial cells, can actually uptake directly toxicity, right? They can uptake heavy metals, they can uptake pharmaceuticals, plastics, synthetics, right? And they obviously uptake the debris of dead and dying tissue as well. So the cells, the immune structures, immune in quotations, the structures that kind of fall under this category are the macrophages, the dendritic cells, the neutrophils. These all display bioremedial and bioaccumulatory processes in the body, right? So it's much more than just them interacting with our microbial system, right? So yes, of course, they're interacting with bacteria. They might be uptaking the bacteria, which again, I would probably say that falls under the category of bioaccumulation and bioremediation, because the immune structures are going to be carrying this toxicity that the microbes accumulated, bringing it over to the lymphatic system, in which we can release it back out into the external environment and outside of our internal environments, thus regulating it. And if we look at this directly and try and look at it with a sliver of objectivity, we understand that macrophages are targeting dead and dying tissues, right? So they are playing this role, this cleanup role that we're kind of suggesting, right? And obviously you can very well see these phagocytes uptaking microbial cells, dead and dying tissues. You can actually observe them uptaking these toxicities as well, right? They are specifically targeting these toxicities. So, some of the specific things that's been documented in the literature based off of my read so far, macrophages have been associated with uptaking aluminum, mercury, cadmium, and even plastic in the body, right? Another part of the literature talks about the pharmaceuticals, how macrophages actually interrupt the use of pharmaceuticals because they're uptaking these pharmaceuticals before they get to act in our bodies, right? So they think this is a problem, obviously, in the modern sense, because these so-called immune cells are interrupting the processes of the pharmaceutical intervention, right? I think this is so fascinating because, our bodies understand that these pharmaceuticals are completely toxic. And so it's actually taking in these pharmaceuticals, interrupting the intervention, right? It's amazing how beautiful the body truly is, how intelligent it is innately. Like, it doesn't need to be told. It's actually trying to interrupt the use of these toxic interventions. So obviously within this framework, it's very easy to understand that these so-called immune cells are playing a very important role in protecting the body from toxicity, right? So they don't just interact with our microbial cells, right? They don't just interact with that microbial system, right? They're not just cleaning that up, they're directly cleaning up the toxicity as well. Like I mentioned, they interfere with pharmaceutical intervention. I think that's absolutely amazing. There's other evidence to suggest that in chronic illnesses, that macrophages actually become dysfunctional. And they say that this contributes to systemic toxicity, lowered immune function, But the reality is that these macrophages didn't lose a war, right? We understand that the war model is terrible. It's unhelpful. It's a manifestation of our problems in our psychological world. It's because the system is saturated, right? The macrophages are totally saturated with toxicity that they become dysfunctional. Again, pointing to the true root causes of chronic illness, right? The buildup of toxicity. And this idea that symptom suppression allows for a greater buildup of toxicity because you're suppressing the body's detoxification and draining pathways. These are what symptoms truly are, as we cover kind of more in depth in the first video. And obviously, the end goal of all of this bioaccumulation and bioremediation, any leftover toxicity needs to get out of the body, right? So the last point of this system is to get to the lymphatic system so that it can be excreted. Obviously, the lymphatic system works closely with our kidneys, our gut, our sweat glands, etc. So the lymphatic system is the body's drainage network. I do love Dr. Berlando's interpretation of our immune or detox system. He calls it a drainage system, right? Because if you're not draining, if you're not successfully releasing the toxicity buildup in your body out into the external environment, the whole process has failed, right? So he calls it a drainage system, which I think is a decent name for it. I kind of agree with that. And obviously kind of sheds light and focuses more on the importance of movement for the lymphatic system to work properly. So we know that the lymphatic system accumulates immune cells. We know that it accumulates toxicity. We know that it accumulates microbes. We know that it accumulates pathogens. We know that this is kind of where everything ends up when we talk about anything to do with the so-called immune system, even well documented in the modern literature, right? And it's kind of admitted as well that it's part of this detoxification process, right? We understand that through the kidneys, through the lungs, through the gut, through the sweat glands, that we are removing toxicity, right? The lymphatic system is dumping into these external channels of drainage, and the toxicity, the lymph, is being drained from the body. It's being removed from the body. The whole point of cleansing the internal environment is to get the toxicity out from your body, out from your internal environment into the external environment. So one interesting thing about the lymph is that it relies on movement. It relies on our breath. It relies on our mobility. It relies on proper nutrition, hydration. So you need to be living in accordance with these principles. And obviously a natural lifestyle, right? When we look at the primitive lifestyle, this encompasses obviously true nutrition, right? Local, seasonal products that allow for the perfect working of our internal systems, including the lymph. We don't need to worry about whether we're hydrated enough, whether we have enough nutrients, whether we need to take supplements or not, even whether we're moving enough or not. And we move in the right patterns that allow our bodies to stay nimble and young for forever, really. The primitive people were able to move until they passed, for the most part, right? It was a very important thing. You needed to be able to move. If you stop moving, you die. And again, this analogy of stagnation being one of the true causes of disease. When the lymph becomes stagnant, our bodies back up, right? If we can't get things out, it doesn't matter all the supplements you could take in the world. If things aren't exiting the body, you could take as much crap as you want, pretend that it's doing something, but your drainage pathways have to be open. That's the important part about healing that a lot of people don't understand. We want the magic bullet. We want to, just take the pill, take the supplement, and move on and say, oh, well, I'm, detoxing, cellular detox. Like, you could take all the zeolite in the world if you have heavy metal toxicity, but you got to be getting these heavy metals out of your body. So obviously we can kind of encompass all of this, call it what you will, drainage system, keep calling it the immune system, as long as you know that that's a misnomer and an improper way to discuss what we're talking about. Call it the detoxification pathway. I kind of like rejuvenation pathway, like the rejuvenation system, because there's a lot of evidence too that show that microbes and phagocytes and immune cells play a really important role in kind of rebuilding our tissues, right? So it's truly a rejuvenation. For the purpose of this video, we keep calling it immune because it's language that we're familiar with, but obviously moving forward, we want to get away from this warlike mentality, this problematic mentality that doesn't really serve us or help us, or doesn't help us understand anything, it doesn't help us heal. So we will be moving away from this in time. All right, and the last thing that I kind of wanted to discuss in my video today, I know these are kind of long videos, but I'm trying to make them pretty comprehensive. I could break them up into a whole bunch of different videos, but what's the point? So this whole concept of tolerance, right? This tolerance versus immune memory. More adequately named tolerance, because that's what we're truly observing, right? If we remain as objective as we can. Obviously, the whole concept of immunity actually stems from this idea, if I remember correctly, from the concept of tolerance, right? We saw that people could become tolerant to substances. We saw that they could become tolerant to alcohol, was kind of one of the specific examples that I remember. You know, other observations that kind of really led us to believe this was the fact that we only get chickenpox once, seemingly. Obviously, there's outliers, which kind of contradicts the whole model. Other things like, you know, milkmaids didn't get smallpox because they contracted cowpox. Again, a little bit of a contradiction because it's a different pathogen, it's a different virus in cowpox than it is in smallpox, and thus the antibody would be different. So why would there be any sort of memory? It's because, well, antibodies are cross-reactive. It's this whole mix of bullshit and post hoc backfill, and you know, it's kind of hard to discern what's true and not, so hopefully these videos help. And the other thing that we kind of say is that, oh, well, once you get sick once, you have a faster response to the next illness, right? Like, this has persisted for a very long time, that you get the flu, you know, 1 year, and then you get it again and you respond quicker to it. Total nonsense. The studies that try to showcase this, again, full of theory ladenness, really no true objectivity, no real controls either. It's more so just trying to make it a convincing argument based off no real world evidence whatsoever. But realistically, the objective observations that we can gather regarding, you know, immunity or immune memory, right? These misnomers, they don't require this whole concept of, you know, an immune system. They don't require this defense system mentality. You know, it can all be explained out through adaptation, right? Our bodies are adapting to our external environments. Our internal environments adapt to our external environments. That is the beauty of the body. We can survive in many different environments, extremely harsh environments. Our bodies are capable to adapt very quickly. And so when you go down south in the sun, it only takes you a week to get a tan. Your body is adapting to the sun. You're building a tolerance to the sun. Obviously, tolerance can be observed in so many contexts. Think of alcohol is the easiest understanding. The sun is an extremely easy way to understand this concept of tolerance, right? Any sort of drugs, you know, over time you need to take more and more drugs. You need to drink more and more alcohol. Even with pharmaceuticals, right? These aren't outside the realm of adaptation and tolerance. You know, over time you need to increase the prescription. Your prescription stopped working, and then, you know, they'll spin this into, you know, the reason why you're not getting better is because you're building a tolerance, or the dose wasn't high enough and we need to increase the dose. And anyways, whether that's the real reason or not, I can leave it up to you to kind of figure that one out. Another great example is wearing glasses. You know, you go get your glasses, over time, increase the prescription, more and more and more, forever and ever. And then you get laser eye, and then it goes away for a bit, and then you're gonna need glasses again because it's only a symptom suppression. You're not actually targeting any sort of root cause. You're not changing any habits that are causing your eyes to go off like that. So we can also be tolerant to pollution, to toxicity. Whether it be the food that we're eating, you can become tolerant to McDonald's consumption. You can be tolerant to air pollution in your environment. You know, if you've lived in cities for generations, you know, this tolerance, you know, this adaptability of our bodies does translate seemingly hereditarily, right? Not necessarily because of genetics, but we can certainly observe that, this adaptation can be passed down. So our bodies do remember that. That is the objective observation. Whether or not it's caused by genetics is a whole other topic. You can go watch this video, and there'll be a lot more videos on this to come. There's a blog post there that you can go check out too over on the Beyond Terrain website. And we can kind of see this other observation when you look at natives, right? Natives are more susceptible to all diseases. They have higher rates of diseases across the board. Obviously they've been introduced to the toxicities at a much more recent time than, the Westerners or the Europeans. We've been doing metal work for quite some time, which releases an extreme amount of heavy metals into the environment. And all of a sudden we come over with our toxic environments, and we put all the natives in slum-like conditions. They all get exposed to metals, they get exposed to all these different toxicities, and they all start perishing from what we call smallpox, and we blamed it on a virus, obviously, but the real reason is that we had toxicity coming over from Europe. We just brought our toxicity over. We brought our contaminated environments over. Another interesting observation that kind of fits into this conversation is microbial antibiotic resistance, right? It's a whole big problem in the medical field that microbes are becoming resistant to antibiotics because they're adapting to this toxicity. The importance of microbes cannot be overstated. We understand that in the terrain paradigm. The modern consensus hasn't caught up so quick, but the reality is that microbes adapt just like our bodies. Microbes actually, I would argue, adapt much quicker, right? They're single cell organisms. If you want to think about it genetically, they all have all these mechanisms to share different genes and traits extremely quickly. So microbes seem to adapt extremely quick to their environments, which again would support this whole idea of pleomorphism, that the microbes can change and adapt to the environment at an extremely quick rate. Again, you can see this in dark field. There's many people who've worked on pleomorphism. We're going to keep talking about pleomorphism. Those are the upcoming videos that I'm kind of working on right now as well. And realistically, what immune memory is built on, like in the modern sense, it totally relies on this idea that antibodies are specific. But of course, this has just not been consistently demonstrated. In the literature, it shows quite the opposite. Any studies that try to control this or try to prove antibodies to be specific, they just fall apart. They can't be reproduced. Again, like I mentioned, it's the cause of the reproducibility crisis in biomedical literature. It is the non-specificity of antibodies. They are non-specific. They cross-react. The reason why we think they're specific is we use them uncontrolled in science experiments, and we say, look, we found these microbes using serological methods, but there's no control, right? We didn't control the same antibodies against other so-called pathogens. We didn't try them against samples that don't contain pathogens. We just used the antibodies and just got positive results, which again, a positive result wouldn't even indicate some sort of isolation, doesn't even indicate a presence, because we understand that false positives are extremely common with antibodies. Again, this whole immune memory just relies on this single observation that the body seems to remember specific pathogens. So people tend to get sick with one illness once, or they get sick with a so-called infectious illness and they die. This is what really supports it, but we understand that toxicity is the real cause of this. It's not some sort of pathogen. And the whole idea that the body remembers, right? It's not an observable phenomenon. We cannot observe a body remembering an illness or a pathogen. And it can't be demonstrated in vitro. It can't be demonstrated in these cell cultures, well, because the cell cultures don't encapsulate the complexity of our human bodies, right? So, but obviously this can't be studied in vivo either. So we sum it up to, you got to trust me because we're the experts and we know that this is true. There are so many contradictions in the idea of immune memory. Even with chickenpox, people can get it multiple times. People get different illnesses over and over again all the time. And we say, oh, well, it's because of mutations. And a lot of it now relies totally on this whole idea of viruses, the whole viral theory. We know that viruses have never been demonstrated to exist. We know that the methods are circular. We know that objectively, it's just never been proven in an empirical setting. All the methods follow one another, and there's a ton of literature out on this now. Even within the viral theory, right, there's still contradictions. You know, varicella zoster can cause meningitis. It can cause chickenpox. It can cause shingles, right? So it's just total nonsense. Same with cowpox. People infected with cowpox have resistance to smallpox. You know, and diagnostically, what's the difference between cowpox and smallpox, or pox in general, right? They're extremely difficult to distinguish diagnostically, and this is again admitted. So we rely on these indirect tests, which cannot be validated in a gold standard method, because diagnostically, which is the gold standard, we can't discern between them, right? So how do we discern between pox illnesses? It's again, this is all admitted in the literature. Similarly, if people have been injected with a certain substance that is supposed to protect us, you can be injected and still get so-called infected with that illness and get that disease. Again, very common thing. And we use this amazing little way of going about it. If you have been injected with a certain substance to so-called protect us against the disease, and you get that disease, we tend to just reclassify the symptoms into something that's a little bit different, right? It's caused by something else. So obviously you didn't get that specific pathogen infect you, right? It was something else that caused it. An example is like polio, right? So when someone gets the exact diagnostic criteria of what would polio be, it can't be polio because they've been injected with a substance that's supposed to protect them from that. Let's call it meningitis. Let's call it Epstein-Barr virus. Let's call it something different, right? So we've reclassified symptoms. We've reclassified symptom profiles more accurately, and diagnostic profiles, right? And so this is how we really get by and just perpetuate this whole concept of immune memory. Same when you look at these injection studies that say that they're effective, right? How do you say it's effective? Well, you inject people with this substance, and then after 4 weeks and 8 weeks and 16 weeks, you test them using a serological test. And if they test positive to having antibodies, then they are immune to the pathogen, right? So that's how those studies are set up. And we're just using antibodies, right? It's like these are irreproducible studies. That's why these injections don't stay on the market that long, because anytime they're tried to reproduce them, it just fails, right? Because again, antibodies are non-specific. They're the cause of reproducibility crisis of the biomedical literature. But you know, we just push out these clinical trials and say, oh, look how safe and effective they are. And for some reason, we use the same efficacy studies to say that they're safe, which again doesn't really make any sense. We control it with an injection that contains all the same toxicities but remove the pathogen or the part of the pathogen. Again, all absolute nonsense. We'll have to dive more into that. That's kind of a topic for the community because YouTube doesn't really like those topics very much. So all of these observations, again, the whole concept of tolerance just fits better when we move past this theory-laden idea that antibodies are specific, which is truly the only evidence that they have for immune memory, and it just falls apart in any sort of empirical study. It's been totally falsified. Any strict empiricist or any scientist with a sliver of objectivity would have to admit this, but obviously their tenure, their labs, their livelihoods, their esteem, their egos all rely on continuing this narrative, so I don't expect that anytime soon. As Dr. Tom Cowan said in our recent podcast episode, you cannot have a dog in this fight. And I think that's a very important thing for scientists to have, but it is a lost piece of science. So if you are interested in implementing some of these principles into your life, go check out the Beyond Train community. Go join the wait list because our founding member spots are going to go extremely quick. And I don't see the reason why you wouldn't sign up to be a founding member. The benefits, I believe, are well worth it. And it's going to be a community of like-minded individuals. We're going to be discussing these things in depth, how to implement them into our lives, and actually work on strategies to implement them, because implementation is the most difficult part. So go sign up for the wait list. That's going to be coming out very soon. If you're watching this video at a later date, go join the community. It's going to be awesome. I'm working on it so hard, day and night. I just absolutely love everything about this community so far, and it hasn't even launched. I'm just obsessed with creating for it, and yeah, it's going to be amazing. So make sure you go check it out. And if you like this video, give us a like, comment, share it with a friend. I think these are important topics to be discussing. I think we're setting a pretty good foundation to try and re-explain some of our, objective observations and even some of our modern observations as well, trying to tie it all in together. Because even within a modern perspective, even if you agree with genetics and antibodies and all of this nonsense, it still doesn't prove the germ theory true. It still doesn't support the pharmaceutical industry, right? So You don't necessarily have to deny all of modern science to come to these conclusions either. The truth always prevails, and if you use logic in any capacity and objectivity, you will get to the right answers. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for listening, guys. Take care.